Have you ever just been at work and stopped to think, what is the point of my life? Am I just doomed to forever work day in and day out without ever actually living? Whatever that means. I have. So last week, I quit my corporate job. I left a position that I had worked my entire career to achieve. I had gotten myself to a breaking point, frankly, months ago, maybe even years ago. But over the last few weeks, those cracks in my mind have turned into canyons, and I finally decided that enough was enough. Before I get too into it, I want to quickly say that this is not a reflection of the company that I worked for or the people that I worked with, all of whom were incredible and amazing and wonderful and lovely and supportive and all of the good things. In fact, my company and the people that I worked with and worked for made this decision really, really, really difficult for me. This whole thing is really just about me and the situation that I put myself into. So I definitely want to make that clear, like right off the top. My situation is unique to me, but I'm making this because I think a lot of the things I was feeling might be relatable to a lot of other people. So how did I get here? Well, I looked around my life and I was honest with myself about what I already knew. I want to wake up slowly in the morning. I want to have time to make meals for myself and my family, time to go on walks that aren't at 5 o'clock in the morning and enjoy them. I want to have the time to make my home a clean and soothing place for me and my family. I want to see my friends more and actually get to experience this city that I've lived in for God, almost 7 years. I don't want to work 60 to 80 hours a week and be so exhausted by the end of each day that all I can do is stare at the TV, barely processing information over a huge plate of takeout again. So I did something about it. Let's take it back for a bit of background about me. I actually started working when I was 15 years old. First as a camp counselor, then in the mall, at the Disney store. In college, I worked the information desk at our student union and I traded work for free yoga at the yoga studio in town. But I loved all those jobs. My first real job in my career started when I was 21. Before I even graduated, I landed a job as a producer's assistant at a very well-known production in New Orleans where I lived. This job, my first job, was both a dream and a nightmare. It's important that I talk about it real quick just because it definitely shaped a lot of my mindset to what's led me to this moment in my life. I always wanted to work in television, and this job was an incredible opportunity that I worked my ass off to get. Every day walking on set, that was the dream. But my boss, he was the nightmare. I actually honestly had blocked out a lot of the abuse that I endured at this job until a couple of years ago, and a therapist kind of cracked it back open for me in my mind, kind of right before the pandemic actually. The verbal, emotional, and sexual abuse and harassment that I endured for my 1.5 years there was really intense. I still don't really like to talk about it, but unfortunately that experience, my first experience in the working world, has had a lasting impact on how I view work and how I have viewed work ever since then, sort of subconsciously. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically being tortured and punished for doing my job really well, living in fear of being arbitrarily fired every single day, being expected to actively work 80 hours a week, but be on call 24/7 and actually be called almost every single night, not being able to call out sick unless I was physically in the hospital, which led to me passing out at work, getting other people really sick, and then actually having to be in the hospital. Just a lot of these sort of like really fucked up things that were expected of me just kind of became super normalized. Honestly, until just a few years ago. Eventually, I was able to get out of that situation and leverage my position to start my career here in Los Angeles in post-production. I moved here when I was 23, and I have worked every single day since the day I landed. I literally got a job on the drive out here and started working the day we got here, and I haven't really stopped. While I've never had to work for someone like my first boss, I've never been in an abusive situation at work ever since that situation. One thing that I really struggled with and really never quite figured out, even after moving here and restarting my career, work-life balance. The truth is, if we want to take it all the way back, I was like a gifted kid in school. I worked really hard to overachieve my entire life, and I was consistently rewarded for putting in just an insane amount of work. And I realized over the years that a huge part of my identity comes from being smarter, working harder, and achieving more than those around me. And I genuinely hate that about myself because it's taken away a lot from the life that I really want to actually be living. My career has really flourished over the last 7 years. I pretty quickly worked my way up the ladder of freelance post-production management, and I've had the opportunity to work on so many amazing shows with so many incredible people. Through the opportunities in my career, I have truly accomplished my dream of working in TV and making TV that matters and making TV that's beautiful and getting my name in the credits and all of the things that I thought at one point were really important to me. And they were. They definitely were. I have had a wonderful time working in TV. In the meantime, in the background of the last 7 years, I've made my own YouTube videos. Hi. This channel, everything I did here, even back in the eating disorder recovery days, this has always been my favorite hobby. As busy as I've been, I have always enjoyed setting aside time to make these videos, even if sometimes I don't make them for a very long time. And of course, through this hobby, I met other YouTubers, and this is what started the side hustle that started 5 years ago of being a YouTube editor, which is honestly how a lot of you guys probably know me. A lot of you probably know me as Sierra's editor, but actually over the years, I've been a YouTube editor for a number of different YouTubers. The side hustle started in earnest in 2018 when I was on a show for Amazon Prime. As much as I genuinely love the work I do for YouTubers, it was around 2018 when any semblance of work-life balance went straight out the window, and frankly, there wasn't a lot to begin with. I was already really stressed about the state of my apartment, if I was gonna have time to clean or to cook or to do really anything for myself that wasn't scheduled. And once I started working nights and weekends after I would come home from work doing editing, yeah, any time to myself was extraordinarily few and far between. But I love to work. I really genuinely do. So even though over the years I've been sad and stressed about my home life, I've actually been really content with my career and my side hustle. Before the pandemic, I actually hired a home assistant who was really helping me keep my personal life in order while I was working on this Apple show and simultaneously cutting for like 3 different YouTubers at the time. And having her around was amazing. Then the pandemic hit. The pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of people, but the pandemic actually had a pretty huge mental impact on me as well. I had to let my assistant go in, I think April or May, when we didn't really know how much longer this pandemic would last, but it wasn't looking good. I was let go from the Apple show that I was working on, and for the first time in my life, I had this abundance of free time. I was still editing, but given everything that was going on in the world, even that scaled back quite a bit. I really just genuinely had a lot of downtime, like the rest of the world, right? But I took that time to cook and bake and clean and paint and make videos. I made time for my friends, honestly, more than I ever had when we could actually be together in person. I felt guilty the first few months of the pandemic for how much I genuinely enjoyed it. In October, production resumed on my Apple show and I went back to work, and I was really happy to be back at work to feel like I had a purpose. But one very huge and very important thing changed. I was working from home. Before the pandemic, working from home had never been an option, but after the pandemic, it was the only option, and I loved it. Not only did I have an hour and a half of my life back because I wasn't commuting to and from work every day, but I was able to stay on top of the house, feed myself yummy meals, and honestly just like keep on top of all of my personal priorities while still working full time. It was a dream I didn't even know I had until I had it. My Apple show ended in 2021, and I went on to an amazing little HBO Max show around the same time. They actually overlapped for a couple of months, so there was a few months in 2021 where I was working 3 full-time jobs on top of each other. I had my Apple show, my HBO Max show, and I was editing full-time. But genuinely, I was still okay because I love to work. Even though when I would go out of town for weddings or vacations, I still had to work, I was okay because I was able to do that. I was able to go on vacations and work. The trouble, I guess, kind of started when I started getting really deep into wedding planning. Mario and I got engaged in March of 2021. And so the back half of 2021, the first half of 2022 was wedding planning time. The HBO Max show that I was working on got picked up for a second season, and as excited as I was, the producer pretty much plainly told me that I was not going to be able to take time off for my wedding, or at least not the amount of time that I had wanted to. That freaked me out. And I realized that something had to change. Through a series of events that I don't need to get into, I landed myself an incredible corporate job at Legendary Television Studios. It was the perfect situation, exactly what I needed at the time. Mainly vacation days. But more than the vacation days, it was more stable, more regulated, and more long-term than the sort of freelance life I had been living up to that point. I started at Legendary in January of 2022, and in the last year and some change, I have had the most amazing time there. I could gush about this job for hours, but I know I've been rambling for a while, so I will just say this. I felt respected, understood, and important there, and I really loved my job. My bosses, they were incredible and super smart people who just taught me so much and were so kind to me. And I was able to take all the time off that I needed for my wedding in 2022, all of the time leading up to it for planning, all of the time I wanted around the actual day. I had sort of spent my 20s dreading the fact that I was going to be working on my wedding day. It was almost like something I just knew was going to be happening. And the fact that I didn't have to work at all was this unbelievable experience that I will forever be thankful to Legendary for giving me. So what went wrong? You might be wondering, why are you quitting your job? Well, the one drawback to my corporate job was that I was once again required to be in the office. Slowly but surely, this work-life balance that I had finally achieved over the pandemic started to dwindle. And also remember, this entire time that I'm working for Legendary, I'm still editing every night and every weekend. I could have stopped doing that, you might think. I had a full-blown job, a full-blown career. I definitely could have stopped the editing, but I didn't want to. All of the wonderful things I have to say about Legendary, I have equally wonderful and amazing things to say about Sierra, who's been my most long-term editing client for the past 5 years. She's kind, she's understanding, she's funny, she's great to work for. Weirdly enough, she's actually been my longest employer. So 2022, I kept at it, cutting videos at night, working full-time during the day, and I was finding, like, in my mind, the more editing I was doing for Sierra, the more ideas I had for her sort of coming. I was feeling very creatively inspired by her channel and her personality. We were talking about this last year, and I pitched her an idea for returning to the main channel that she really liked. We sort of worked it out behind the scenes for a couple of months and launched it this year, as you guys know. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, this shift in content for her had me being a lot more involved. Suddenly, this side hustle that I'd had for years was becoming honestly like a full-time job with the amount of hours I was putting in every week. So I'm working 40 hours for Legendary, 20 to 30 hours a week for Sierra, and that's when the panic attacks started. I knew that doing both was clearly unsustainable, but I didn't really know what to do. My life, up until this point, has been completely wrapped up in the work that I do, my productivity, who I am to my employers. Not being at work sort of freaks me out. But the pandemic forcing me to be at home more and getting married to the absolute love of my life has forced me to change my perspective on what's important to me. Looking to the future, I know I need to prioritize myself more because we want kids and sorry, I want more pets. And I want the house to always be clean and to smell good. Mostly, I want to stop spending literally thousands of dollars on takeout every month. And so suddenly, as I sit here, about to turn 30, still very young, I find that this need for work-life balance that I've sort of just ignored for all these years is more present and more important in my life than ever. Because of the pandemic, I've tasted it. I know what it can feel like, and more than anything else, I want it back. I think that this perspective shift is the biggest reason that I reached this sort of mental breaking point. I've had a really hard time balancing everything this year, and I think in the past I would have just dealt with it, moved on, ignored it mostly, maybe even honestly bragged about how much I'm working. I don't know. why, but I definitely would have. But recently, Sierra approached me with a bunch of amazing ideas and offered me a lot of professional and creative freedom. She offered me an opportunity that is incredible and is really going to hopefully make an impact on a lot of other women, and also just be really fun for me too. And even more so, with producing and editing content, I get to engage in my hobby and make money off of it full time. I will get to make my own hours and work from home and get my life back. So here we are. I quit my job, my corporate job, and I can safely say it was for my mental health, because I would have probably just kept doing both things until I died. Yes, I know I do have another job that I'm going into. It's not like I'm quitting my job with a risk of the unknown. But if you know me at all and you know my personality, you know that I would never do that to myself. I always have a plan. My first priority is my family, and I would never do anything to jeopardize Mario, Beethoven, or Big Tuna's lifestyles or well-being. And I'm really hopeful that with this new change, I'm gonna be able to be there for them more than I ever have been before. My expectations for myself have always been sky high to a fault. That's just who I am. But I'm hoping that, you know, taking a step back from my career and focusing on things that are important to me will allow me to enjoy the next few decades of my life and not be this stressed out, anxious, depressed, overworked ball of stress that I have been for the last 9 to 10 years. I think maybe I'm most excited to travel without guilt. Oh no, I'm most excited to achieve work-life balance, or maybe learn what that actually means. I only had it for a few months during the pandemic, and there was a pandemic going on. So mentally, I'm definitely gonna work on reshifting my self-worth away from my productivity and figuring out who I really am. I turned 30 in May, and I'm really excited for the next decade. I think it's gonna hold so much for me and my family and my friends and my life. And God, I just can't wait. That's all I have to say. It's taken me forever to film this video. I hope it comes out good. Oh yeah, my hair is different. I probably should have said something. My hair is not purple anymore. I'm in the middle of a hair transformation, so I hope you guys like what you see so far, because this is the direction we're headed. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next week.